Well, the interesting thing, we'll start talking about BTP, and the interesting thing is that BDC wasn't even around when you and I started working together several years ago. So this has all happened very, very quickly. So why don't you give us an overview for those that don't know? Tell us about BTP, and then we can maybe look at some use cases for some examples. But give everyone an education, because that's where we originally met, was when you were over that. So can you talk to us a little bit about BTP?
Okay, certainly. So BTP it's one of those things, it's a necessary evil when you deploy an application. Be it, usually it's SAP, our ERP, our success factors for HR, digital supply chain, any of our lines of business. But to make it work. So to make it work, meaning you don't just have SAP, you also have other third parties, Oracle, Salesforce, whatever. So you have integration to help integrate to multiple applications. Then you have this thing called application development, another big pillar, Dan, that when people want to deploy, we used to do something called customize the core, and that made upgrades very difficult. So now we recommend customers extend the core outside of the core, called side-by-side extensions. You can keep updating. So application development is another big piece. The third thing is, always around automation. People talk about repetitive tasks. How do I make those tasks fast? So automation's a big piece. AI, everyone talks about AI. I have a lot of events in the office with customers, and everybody has an AI project. Not many people have a use case. So AI is a hot topic. That all fits under BTP. And then finally, the whole data component, master data, as well as, analytics. How do I do reporting? And do I extract data out of SAP and put it someplace else? Or do I, how do I do reporting across multiple systems? And with that, planning. Planning, Dan's a side extension, which is quite complex, workforce planning or financial planning. So that was kind of a lot. Is that a good answer?
Yeah. So were you around when SAP came up with the original concept of BTP when they rolled it out?
Yeah.
Okay. So would you say that, and by the way, folks, Jack and I haven't rehearsed any of this. I'm asking him questions. He has no idea what I'm going to ask him, and that's
what makes it fun, Dan. That's what makes it all good.
That's what we want to do. So, do you know any customers that, let's hypothetically say that you have a use case of someone that used Integration Suite, for example, to maybe it's to replace an EDI, their trading partners, and using TPM, in a B2B situation. Do you know any that got onto BTP, used Integration Suite in this use case, and then decided, it wasn't a good decision, that we made a mistake? Do you know anybody that would say that?
So I'm a believer, Dan. No one woke up in the morning and says, I want Integration Suite. What they woke up in the morning and said, how do I make this stuff work? And companies have alternatives. A lot of companies, one of the problems they have is they got a contract with a lot of integration companies, be it Boomi, Informatica, Tibco. They have all these contracts. They're not using them all. And then the idea was, well, what's your alternative, SAP? And the answer is Integration Suite. But it's an economic decision. But to answer your question, Dan, I've heard of no customers with a failure on Integration Suite. And that's actually almost always the first use case for BTP. And the reason is that's the biggest problem. I've got these 14 different systems. How do I make them all play in the same sandbox?
And can you share a use case with us about a successful BTP implementation utilizing Integration Suite to convert those partners?
Certainly. So
I know you can't mention names, but can you give us an example?
I'd rather not mention names, but so there's an oil and gas company, which there's a lot of those in Texas, and they had 14 different systems. And the business problem was they had 15 million activities a year, helicopters, pipelines, bulldozers, everything's moving around. And they spent 25% of their time just managing those activities, not solving the activities, just trying to figure out how to make them all combine them. So I spent about 10 weeks, deployed this tool called Integration Suite, and they found a 20% improvement in their utilization just by combining those 15 million tasks into a single system. They call it their control center. And that's where they do their central management from. But again, it was driven by a business problem. Was we have 14 different stacks. How do we make it all work? And people go crazy.
Very good. I can comment, Jack, that what you're aware of, we have a use case where we have a customer that was wanting to get off a third-party provider for EDI, and we helped them convert 200 trading partners over using Integration Suite to BTP. And the director said that when we were completed, it was a huge success, and that that it was going to save them $250,000 to $500,000 a year. And that led to SAP actually interviewing the director and writing a success story, which is on your website today. So that was a pretty cool use case for us. Give me an example of the 5 pillars in BTP outside of Integration Suite. Give me an example of one of the other pillars that you've seen where customers had a lot of success.
So let me start out with people when they think about BTP, they see all these pillars. But I talked earlier about the economics. People have multiple contracts for application development and integration and AI and data. And what they seem to want, Dan, is one throat to choke and one contract. And one contract meaning if you overuse integration, I want to use that money for application development, or I want to use that money for AI so that I'm not wasting money, if that makes sense. So we're seeing a lot of companies centralize on BTP because of the way our contract, it's an enterprise agreement that works like a buffet menu. So another common use case is around automation. I laugh, but during COVID, we all learned a lot, Dan. I learned how to use that camera on my PC. My first meeting, I met a chemicals guy, and he said, "We're using our cameras now." And I was like, "I don't even know how to turn my camera on." So we started, we figured out how to turn our cameras on. He had this brown paneling, in the background, and he was like, "Oh my God, my wife's gonna make me, change my paneling," which drove a whole industry during COVID. But for humanity, automation and bots became really popular in that timeline. Automation meaning a lot of companies, big medical company we've all heard of, they had a lot of manual process to order, entry, and to ship products. And the struggle was if people are working from home or they have COVID, they can't order and manual all this processing of. And believe it or not, you still need, you still need the drugs, you still need the syringes, you still need the beds, the sheets, everything else. And so they've automated their order process. Very common use case is automation. And then with that, the second major use case really is just the whole bots. Big hospital system here in Dallas. Again, this is all COVID stuff, but it's kind of fun. Not fun, but I get what I'm saying. Is they had people come into the hospital. "I have COVID. Are you sure?" So they built bots so you could call the hospital. A, do we have room in the hospital? And B, what are your symptoms? Are you having a hard time breathing, or are you sweating? There's a whole lot of symptoms. And so those bots also drove behavior. Do we have enough doctors? Do we have enough drugs? Do we have enough ventilators? Do we have enough beds? So that whole system started out with just how to automate because they didn't have enough operators to take all these phone calls. And they built automation so that they had analytics around what they had in their hospital system. And that was built in about 4 weeks, the prototype was. So again, fast turnaround. And again, COVID caused change in humanity, like why we're on the phone on our cameras today.
Yeah, that's a great use case, an interesting story. Are they still utilizing it today?
Well, I don't think they have COVID calls, but they still use bots. And bots drive me crazy too, Dan. So don't get me wrong. Nothing like calling my bank. Your call is very important to us. We have an unusual call volume, but technology can't help all of that. But the whole process of automation and using bots really took off, and they still do use it for other use cases.
That's great. That's great. Okay, one of the other pillars of BTP is AI. People talk about AI. You can't read something. You can't turn anything on with everyone's talking about AI. Tell us a little bit about the use of AI inside BTP and if you have any use cases there.
Okay, so certainly. So AI, everybody wants to hear about AI. Everyone's mostly because their CEO, said we're doing AI because our stock price demands it, and so people jump on the bandwagon. So really, to me, there's three main areas of AI. One is the whole idea of an automated assistant. So we have ours is called Joule. Microsoft has Copilot. They're all integrated, but rather than typing in the right query, you can just ask this digital assistant, and it'll tell you stuff. Um, Embedded AI comes with a lot of SAP applications. Embedded AI is, for example, help me write a job description. You can't go to Chat GPT for that because Chat GPT doesn't know what your other job descriptions look like, your company standard. But SAP, we have all your data or a lot of your data. So you can write a job description or help me understand my financials. These are all embedded use cases. Custom AI is where it's not out of the box, but it's a use case. For example, there's a big chip manufacturer in California in the AI business, and they were trying to figure out, they had a problem with, because there's 8 different areas of the manufacturing process, customers would call and say, what's the status of my chip? Well, it took them 30 to 45 minutes to figure out where in the pipeline it was. So they used AI to kind of automate that process. A lot of it's predictive, so it's not, true generative AI. Part of it is, but they brought that process down to a 2-minute response time. So when a customer calls and says, what's the status of, my chips, then they can get that response very, very quickly.
Yeah. So we have better than I do, but there's a tremendous number of ECC customers that are facing some tough decisions over the next few years. Have you seen some of them that have not made a decision whether to, go to Rise or go to the public cloud or even, get over to S/4HANA? Have you witnessed or seen where BTP helped customers that are on ECC be more efficient, produce things at a better rate? If you have, can you give a couple of examples of how they've been able to use BTP to
Yeah,
help them?
yeah. So people talk about ECC, and there's a lot of ECC customers. And the hard part is in life, again, I go back to economics. If it works, why fix it? And sometimes in the old days, doing a modernization was $100 million project for big companies. Obviously small companies were not, but nowadays companies are grappling with, do I do the big bang, or if I've got subsidiaries, do I do one private and then some public cloud? How do I mix those up? If you've got subsidiaries, or I was talking to a company last week, their CTO, and they have financials, all ECC, and they've got a bunch of other subsidiary businesses. And their business strategy is to buy companies and spin companies. So what they want the flexibility to do is to do all that. So in their case, the thought when I suggested to them was, have one centralized system and then have public cloud on those other systems. But in the meantime, how are you doing analytics? And that's a tough problem, Dan, because even on ECC, you still got to do reporting. And so one big use case ECC system customers is doing analytics, doing simple, where do I put the data so I can report on it? I can massage it. Another use case is BTP is integration. Even you're on ECC, you still have multiple environments. I was reading in Forrester someplace, I think it was Forrester, that the average company has 54 on-prem systems and over 100 cloud systems. Well, how do you get those to work together? That's a lot of spaghetti. And that's why I talked about people have multiple options, MuleSoft, all the different vendors and contracts. Why not simplify that? And we're seeing a big use case. That goes back to the integration suite question you talked about before. Customizing, there's still application development. Companies are still, there's a big oil company I was talking to a few months ago, their CTO, and his problem is over 50% of his code in ECC was custom. He said, Jack, I don't know if this is even used anymore. I don't know whether this code is still usable, which stuff I can take off, and I can't just turn the business off, for a week to study it. And so the idea is, start writing your new applications on the outside, this whole side-by-side extensions, Dan, and that way you're doing your new development and you're not customizing that core to get that term called technical debt. You know what the technical debt term is? Stuff you built, and are you using it? The guy who wrote it either didn't document it, or he quit, or he died, because some of these systems are 20 years old. The software works. And so, again, economics, it's hard to justify fixing something that still works.
Yeah, especially when you have these customers that have been on SAP 20, 25, 30 years. We've got one that's they're paralyzed right now because they admittedly say that, we've got warehouses of custom code. It literally would fill up warehouses, and we don't know where to start, and they've got a lot of older technology. And so your answer right there, I think, is the best answer. And I think it's a great answer that, you can do both. You can still have that environment that's not broke per you, and them. But any new things, any new work efforts can be done with the newer technology. So that would be sort of a way that an easier answer, and not as simple to them, I'm sure, but an easier answer for them on how they could move forward. You agree?
Totally agree. And then also they can start doing assessments. They could have you come in, Dan, for example, or another partner come in and what part of your code are you actually using? And you'd be surprised, Dan, how many people have never archived. I haven't archived in 20 years. Well, why not? Well, I haven't needed to. When's the last time you looked at that data more than 5 years old? I need access to it. Well, you need read access, I'm sorry. So archive that off, make your system smaller, more manageable, and then you can start to tackle that beast rather than having this huge, animal. Have a small subset of data you're actually using, not just this old code that, again, technical debt. That's a big struggle with a lot of companies.
Yeah. So if you have a crystal ball, okay, and you have these companies that, we know that support's going to run out on several things. We know with BW, for example, it's not long, and 27 is a magical year. What do you advise companies to do today? What do you tell them that, you're sitting here, 25 is almost gone, and we've got 26 and 27, sort of a bellwether cow, what do you tell them?
So I first tell them, thank you for inquiring about this. And I'd like to start with, what are you trying to do? Because most companies, Dan, their goal is to, what's everyone's goal in life? Their goal in life is to look good to my boss. My goal is to keep my job and, progress forward. We're all humans. That's how it works. So what I would do is say, what are your main KPIs? Do I want to do this AI thing, this machine learning stuff, which sounds really sexy, whatever that is? How do I go about doing that? If that's a requirement, then come talk to, you, me. We have people that can help guide people on how to prioritize based on their requirements. There's no one size fits all. Just along the lines of, people say a lot of times, well, I want to get data out of SAP. Okay. Well, why? Because SAP doesn't have good reporting. All right. Well, what does that mean? Oh, I want to extract data out of SAP and I want to replicate it someplace else. And then that's a great use case until you have 7. Out of the company in St. Louis, they had 7 replicants. Is that a word? It sounds kind of like out of the Terminator.
I don't know.
But they replicated the data 7 different times before it got to some of the end users. And then I asked them, well, is that data even accurate? Oh, we don't know. All right. If you thought about, keeping the data in SAP and using some new tooling to access that live data. If most of your data is SAP, this term called data gravity. Keep the data at its source. Don't replicate it. Replicate it. You don't know how dirty it gets. You don't know what it really means. Nothing like comparing this year's data and last year's data and thinking it's the same data. So really, to me, it's no one size fits all, but having a customer help prioritize what's your main goal. Because again, we're all humans, Dan. I want to look good to my boss, and I want to meet my KPIs, whatever those KPIs are.
Very good.
Is that too generic, or is that?
No, that's very good. Thank you, Jack. I had one of your colleagues that was on a meeting with us with one of our customers, and they asked him the question about. They said, we've got a data issue, but we really think that if we bring AI in, that we can really do some good things and make sense of it. And your colleague said, well, at the end of the day, if you have bad data, he said, I wrote it down. He said AI and bad data equal artificial stupidity. And I thought that,
and that's exactly the issue, Dan. And that's the struggle with AI. You can go to Chat GPT. Is Dan going to pay his bill this month? You can ask Chat GPT that. It'll give you an answer. The problem is it the right answer? But if your data is already stored, if you're an SAP-based company, if your data is in SAP, Dan, Dan's a big customer. We got all Dan's history. If Dan's paid his bill 99% of the time before, Dan's likely to pay his bill. If Dan is every third quarter or every fourth quarter of every year, Dan's company has a cash flow problem, they don't pay his bill. You know what? I can predict that because I have your data. And that's why AI is so key. If you have an SAP, all your data is in SAP or most of it, run your AI on SAP. Because again, the data gravity. And that's kind of why Databricks is so important to us. I'm kind of getting off topic here because companies want to do this AI with SAP and non-SAP data. And they don't want to replicate it all. That gets so expensive. So, with zero copy, you can actually do AI on this SAP and non-SAP data because it's all trusted.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question on BTP, and then we're going to segue over to BDC, Business Data Cloud. So if there's a prospect on the phone or an existing SAP customer that's watching this today or is going to watch it, and they're going to hang on every word you say because you're a smart guy, right? What is your summarization of why you should go down the path of BTP today? And it could be, we know there's 5 pillars, and we know that's a very, very broad question. But based on all the data that you have, okay, from all the customers that you've touched and seen and been a part of, what do you think the greatest lift is for a customer that's contemplating, what do I do and why should I do it? And does it bring an ROI and help my business be more efficient? I realize that we didn't rehearse this at all, so that's a big question, but can you come up with something quick, Jack?
Yeah. So Dan, I'm not very smart, but I do think in terms of economics. Economically, if I've got 9 contracts, let's talk about integration alone. I've got MuleSoft, I've got Boomi, I've got Tibco, it all works. The struggle is if I've got all those contracts, I'm using a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, I'm wasting money. So my summary is for things like app development, planning, integration, automation, I may not have said app development, AI, one single platform economically is the best solution because you're not wasting money on all these multiple contracts. It's an economic decision. And then when you want to go, we look at new ideas, when you have this, it's called a BTPEA, Business Technology Platform Enterprise Agreement. And what that does though, is when you want to try something new, you haven't got to buy it. It's called a free tier. You go to our Discovery Center, which is, on Google SAP Discovery Center, and it'll give you all the different options out there. It's free training. It's, you can try it. You haven't got to buy it to make sure it works for you. And it's just an easy way to get started, low risk. And again, I go back to my thesis statement. We all want to look good to our boss. We all want to keep our jobs. We all want to be productive. And we all want, best of suite as long as it makes sense. And those things all fit on the SAP solution set for SAP customers, Dan. If you're not an SAP customer, I'm not suggesting you go to BTP because I don't think, we're not the right fit if you're not an SAP customer. But if you're an SAP shop, we are the best fit.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Well, I think there were a lot of people that were a little bit surprised when SAP announced that they were going to, in essence, take a little bit out of the BTP platform as it was just getting rocking and rolling, right? And put it in the business data cloud and create business data cloud. Can you educate us on why did SAP create the business data cloud?
Yeah. So SAP is an application company, and traditionally so first off, BDC to me is still part of BTP. So SAP, we've got a separate, I was a BTP guy, now I'm a BDC guy. In reality, we're one big team. So, it's all extensions to the SAP applications. But traditionally, our strategy was we're an SAP applications company, moving to the cloud, software as a service. Traditionally, on our analytics side, we gave you a great toolbox called DataSphere. And this DataSphere thing allowed you to combine SAP and non-SAP data and do analytics. It was a great toolbox, Dan. What customers want, if you want to build a new barn in your backyard, it'd be great to give you a bunch of wood and a great toolbox and say, Dan, get after it. But I would argue your wife would prefer a barn. Maybe you're handy, you love building stuff. But most humans would rather get a software as a service, a barn. And so SAP's strategy is we're an applications company. Why not give someone a barn if they want a barn? Or, and by more precise, for HR data. I don't want to write my own. I don't want a cool toolbox to build analytics around HR. I want to have a application that does analytics on HR that comes out of the box. I can still customize it, but I don't have to build a toolbox anymore. I have a turnkey solution. Does that make sense? Or did I kind of ramble on that?
No. Talk a little bit more about DataSphere, and because really it's evolution of BW. I mean, it's a warehouse.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. So BW. Yeah. So BW came out. How old is your youngest kid, Dan? If you don't mind me asking. I won't jade you. My youngest is 22 years old.
I'm 23.
He got one more year at SMU, which is a school down in Dallas. Awesomeness. BW was born before my son was born. Right. So, and when he was an infant, he crawled around a little bit. He's a different human than he was 22 years ago. So the same with BW and the requirements around analytics. BW works great, but it's centralized IT, building reports that, Dan, you're going to love this report. I'm going to give it to you. Well, as society's moved on, people want to do self-service analytics now. By and large, most of the customers I see, all the customers I see, want self-service analytics. Is their dream with good data. So the idea is BW had its time, but it needs to be, the term is modernized. So I can still do centralized reporting if I want on a modernized BW, but DataSphere gives you the ability to write your own reports. And so with combining SAP data and non-SAP data, and that's a key thing because we talked earlier about there's no pure wall-to-wall SAP shop. I mean, I've sold to customers when I was in sales. I sold to companies who said we are SAP first. That doesn't mean they were only SAP. That just means the majority of their applications were SAP. But they still had, 20 or 30 other small applications, and they had to do analytics around the whole thing.
So for everybody's benefit, and you add on to this, but Business Data Cloud is made up of DataSphere, SAC, which is your planning and analytics tool, and you've got Databricks, which you referenced earlier, and you've got the AI component all mixed in. What else? What else would you want people to know about what makes up Business Data Cloud?
So one key thing is the data products, which are these solutions around, for example, in finance, I want turnkey financial applications for analytics out of the box to make it, again, a software as a service. I don't want a toolbox where I got to build my own. So, for example, a hot topic right now is cash flow, especially with the oil companies. Cash flow is king. So they want to. So we have data products, and companies can build their own data products, and partners are building data products. Deloitte's building them, EY is building them. A lot of companies are building data products to solve problems. But the other piece to this is not just the toolbox, but it's these applications that come out of the box around, procurement, around HR, around finance, which is what companies do for a living. They don't want to always develop. They want best practices. And SAP has been around, 30 industries providing best practices. So we give you the ability to customize, but we give you a lot of off-the-shelf stuff as well.
So make the correlation, please, with that example you just used into what everybody, the first time they hear it, they're a little panic stricken when you talk about clean core. Help piece that together for people as it relates to the intelligent apps, the data products that are all being developed as we speak. And how does the company have a clean core? They tell me on a consistent basis, well, I can have a clean core, but I can't have a clean core. It's the combination's tough of
clean
business.
Core to me is all about every time SAP or any vendor, when you buy a cloud solution, SAP is always innovating and making the product better. If you're running an on-prem product 20 years ago, like a lot of our customers on ECC, they've taken advantage of none of SAP's innovations for 20 years. They just haven't. They haven't upgraded, which is fine. It works. Why fix it? The struggle is a clean core is going to allow you with SAP, or even if it's running, you're running an Oracle application. If you don't customize that core, when SAP releases it, you can very quickly bring it live into your environment. So you don't have that, that feature came available 4 years ago, but you haven't upgraded yet, so you don't have it. So the advantage of a clean core is just allow that upgradability very quickly. And that's why I talked about the side-by-side extensions, Dan, so that you can do those extensions and have the modern application. To me, the whole BDC concept is it's a clean core, but BDC is about the data itself, and doing, rather than, I talk about replicating, which is, great in theory until it's expensive in terms of got to buy the data, buy all that storage and then move it around. And the cost of the end user is he looking at the recent data or the second replication or the fifth replication, and is that data clean? So clean data is different than clean core. Clean data is, it's the source data. It hasn't been corrupted or changed. So one more example is you move. I know you haven't moved, or maybe you did move and didn't tell me, but if you moved, you changed your address. Maybe if you have a mailing campaign, if I've replicated that data, I have your old address, not your new address. Does that make sense, Dan? So your source data, so now I keep that source data clean. So every time I'm doing analytics, I want to do a mail campaign, I have your new address, not the one I had my replicant, which is old data.
Great point. And for the record, Jack, you can ask my wife. I'd rather get hit in the head with a hammer than move. So that's not something we need to worry about.
When our kids were all gone, yeah, my wife I was like, we're going to renovate or move. We're not doing both. Once we renovated, and your next husband can buy 10 houses. This husband's done. We're done moving.
Talk about the other peg in the wheel, Databricks. Help people understand why Databricks is incorporated into Business Data Cloud.
Okay, certainly. So Databricks is all about AI and machine learning and using data to make decisions. So one thing about SAP, we used to have this term. I would say we would build solutions and compete. And now we have this thing called, I call it snuggle, don't struggle. It's not my idea. A guy I work with came up with this term 5 years ago. So snuggle, don't struggle. Databricks has got a great platform. Why on earth would SAP build a competitor to that? Why not snuggle up with Databricks and find a win-win? So Databricks, where's all the financial data for, of the Fortune 100, 90+% of that data? Where is the financial data? It's sitting in SAP. So the win-win here is people want to use AI or machine learning to make better decisions on their SAP data. So they can do that on that platform called Databricks, but I don't have to replicate that data. I can use a zero copy called Delta Share and use the source data to make all these AI and ML decisions. And when I get a new AI use case, which companies are still grappling with those use cases, but when they get a new use case, they can run that use case on a workload in Databricks using all that source data on their SAP system. Because I talked about data gravity earlier. Go where the data is. Don't move the data. Then you got to manage it. Keep the data in its source system. And that's why the BDC, love fest with Databricks. It's a win-win. And Databricks has the same thing. At least the ones I've talked to. Maybe somebody else doesn't, but the people I've spoken with. When we go in the field, we talk to customers, and the Databricks, we're side by side saying the same tune. It's a win-win for customers as well as, everybody.
Okay, I'm going to pause just real quick. For those of you that we've got a few questions that have come in, we're going to get to those. We're just going to finish the conversation on BDC. But before we wrap up, we'll answer the questions you've sent in and feel free to send more. Okay. You've got a customer today that is an SAP shop. They have not pulled the trigger to go to BTP. And now BDC's out. And BDC causes, with it being there, sort of how I started the conversation, a lot of people that aren't that close to it and don't live it and breathe it every day like the both of us. What do I do? Can I get the same benefits with BDC that I would get with BTP? Or do I need both?
So it really depends on, again, when I talk to people, what's your biggest problem? What's your biggest KPI? Because my thesis statement in life, Dan, is I want to keep my job. I want to look good to my boss. Thesis statement number one. So if my biggest problem is how do I integrate everything? BTP. If my biggest problem is just pure analytics, you can do a BDC contract. They are two separate contracts, but that doesn't matter. They go hand in hand. And the same people that a lot of the BDC components used to be in a BTP EA, they're kind of splitting that out next year, which is fine. But the use cases for application development, for AI, for a single pane of glass, building out a portal, doing mobility, doing app development, integration, this is all BTP. BDC is just the analytics. So really, it really depends on where your biggest pain point is first. But I don't want to say I know your problems. Every customer has unique problems.
Yep. And then there's one other thing that I think is of note for those that are on BW 7.5. Tell us what happens if a BW 7.5 customer decides to sign up with BDC. What happens?
So you get an extension. Running out of support for some companies is no problem. A lot of companies have mandates about running under, like having supported product, because if you don't have support, you know what that means. Something's wrong. Good luck to you. But what it's going to do is extend the lifespan of that VW, because if you're running tons of reports for years and it's worked great, companies don't want to fix it because, again, don't fix what isn't broken. So if BW is working now, this just gives you a lifeline to extend to 2040, which is all great. And you can even modernize that and integrate that in with BDC to get all the, again, the goal to me, many customers want the ability for self-service. You know, Dan, you're an agent of, you know, whatever your job is in the travel department or the, you know, the manufacturing department. You want to run your own analytics. You don't want to call an IT guy. You want the ability to maybe call the IT guy or maybe do my own report. We want to give you the flexibility to do what you want to do.
And for clarification, is it the extension, if a BW customer purchased BDC today, is it extended to 2040 or 2030?
2040. 2030
okay.
for 7.5 2030, but yeah, so some of them were 2040. I don't know the exact, off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact release numbers. Some of them are 2030, some of them are 2040.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, one more question on BDC, and then I'm going to ask some questions that the audience has. So you're talking to someone today that is seriously thinking, analytics are very important to me, but I've got a data issue. I've got, you know, warehouses full of custom code and this sort of thing. Do you think that in a timely manner that the intelligent apps and the data products that are inside BDC are going to be significant enough that if they don't see what they want in that particular, you know, because of the industry they're in or whatever, do you think, would you recommend to them be patient or benefit from what you can today to help, you know, again, that sort of that baby steps modernization as opposed to having to fix the whole world at once? Will you tell a prospect or a customer to stay where they are? Will you tell them, you know, you got integration issues, just like you said more than once? Go ahead and sign up with BTP, and as BDC matures, you know, then you can add that in. We get this a lot, and so I'm letting you answer the question that we get asked on a weekly basis.
And that's why I say, what's your biggest problem? If my problem is I got to learn to run faster, lift more weight, lose 100 pounds, you know, these are three very different, you know, one requires you to eat more, one requires you to work out more, one requires you to just, you know, eat less. So really it's what's your priority? What's the biggest KPI that we can solve your pain first? But doing analytics on bad data is just going to lead to bad reports. You know, bad. You get the answer, just the wrong answer. So I'm a big believer in clean your data and archive and get rid of that old data. You know, master data. We haven't talked about master data, but master data is an important concept. Just the whole idea of what is my data and what does it mean? So I think I'm a big believer in, you know, figuring out your KPI is, you know, what's the most important priority, but you can't solve world hunger. We have to do things, you can do several tracks at the same time, Dan, but you can't just swallow a fat pill and become Charles Atlas.
That's true. That's true. You've tried, hadn't you?
I should try. Yes.
These people would be awfully impressed if they knew what you just finished doing. Tell everybody, what did you just do?
Well, I just did the Berlin Marathon. So
ain't no big deal. Everybody does that.
Yeah. I did a bunch of Ironman, so we all have strange hobbies. You know,
I could do the Berlin Ironman or whatever. I could do it in a golf cart about as good as I could. All right, Jack, thank you. Let me ask you a few questions from the audience. Here it is. While cloud data is being shared across SAP and non-SAP systems, how does BTP ensure eventual consistency, conflict resolution, replication lags between systems while BTP applications update or override business data?
So I think the question is, how does BTP ensure data quality? Is that kind of a sum of what I'm hearing here?
Yeah, that's fair.
So data quality is hard because data statistically changes 8% a year. You know, people move, people die, people, you know, part numbers change. So you have to look at solutions. And we're a partner with a company called Calibra to solve that data quality problem. We have our old solutions on-prem, but again, part of this snuggle, don't struggle is this company called Calibra. We've got a very tight integration with, and they're part of our solution around that data quality problem. And they have tooling to help automate all those processes.
Okay. All right. Very
In
good.
SAP, we don't sell their product, but they're on our SAP store, if you know what that means. And I've got people on my team who, because that is a very common problem, is data quality. And you go to any company and they say my data is bad, but I'm just going to keep going with it. And I get that. Again, what's your KPI? And we'll meet you where you are.
Next question. What is SAP's plan to bring in unstructured data into the AI for decision making?
So that's all part of the whole Databricks solution set. That's a very common issue because, unstructured data to me is video, documents. We have this long-term partnership with OpenText around unstructured, but that's a big investment area because more and more data is becoming unstructured.
Okay. Next question. With the recent Snowflake announcement, what should customers use Snowflake for? It seems like a lot of overlap of functionalities between DataSphere, Databricks, and Snowflake.
Okay, that's a great question. So Snowflake is an application for analytics. Works great. And they grew because people wanted to do sophisticated analytics at a small level. Well, like everything else in a company, it starts in a shadow IT and then gets bigger and bigger, Dan. So you hear about it, didn't get bought by central finance or central procurement, but it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So traditionally, we competed with Snowflake. They would use Snowflake internally because it works. They love it. So they would extract their SAP data. They'd have to rebuild the logic and then cram it into Snowflake. How'd that go for you? Well, it's great until SAP changes the structure of the data. Or, what does 8 mean, Dan? Does $8, $8, 8 Twinkies, 8 pairs of shoes, 8 miles to your house? What does the number 8 mean? So SAP was struggling. Snowflake was struggling. So we announced, I think 2 days ago or 3 days ago, much like our Databricks relationship, the Databricks and Snowflake compete. They are competitors. They are, in the throes of a battle. And so the snuggle, don't struggle term that I love to use, we now have that same zero copy share with Snowflake. So what we announced is the ability to no longer have to extract the data out of SAP. And everyone on the phone or who's on this who understands SAP data, there's a lot of tables. There's a truckload of tables, and they're all, with good German names, and you have to extract the logic. In rebuilding, that's very painful. So we've simplified the snuggle, don't struggle concept to make it a win-win with what used to be a big competitor of ours. Not really a competitor, a non-partner, someone who I would not consider our friend. That now we're friends.
Okay. All right.
Snowflake, to me, Snowflake and Databricks are going to continue competing.
So are you saying that if someone, a customer decides to purchase licenses for Business Data Cloud, BDC, that they could conceivably use DataSphere, SAC, Snowflake instead of Databricks?
Correct. So for their analytic platform, they could have that zero copy share. So again, our goal in life is to stop replicating, because replicating causes data quality problems. We just talked about that. Causes lag of data, not current data. If your data gravity is centralized around SAP, have a zero copy share so that system can access that live data and minimize those problems.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? I learned something today. I wasn't aware of that. So thank you very much for that, Jack.
Yep, it's 3 days old or 2 days old, or well, I forgot what day it got announced, but it was Tuesday.
I'm glad that question was asked. Here's another question from the first part of our conversation. If someone wants to use Integration Suite for all their various integrations, B2B integrations, whatever, can they buy that as a one-off, or do they have to buy the BTP platform to have access to Integration Suite?
So SAP allows you to do a SKU for Integration Suite. You can do that. The hard part is you're going to save no money by doing that versus buying what I said the term BTPEA, Business Technology Platform Enterprise Agreement. That includes, Integration Suite, but it also gives you the ability to use other things as well. The application development, I want to add mobility. I want to abstract the core. I want to do all these other features. Buying BTPEA is going to cost no more, but just give you the flexibility to try those things. Unlike if you buy the SKU for Integration Suite, you get Integration Suite, the exact same one you get off the BTPEA with less flexibility. Does that make sense?
Very good.
Is that clear?
It does. It certainly does. Okay. All right. Those are our questions that that the audience had. Do you have any closing thoughts, Jack? Advice to anybody? Not knowing exactly everyone we're talking to, but do you have any advice?
So as a human, the advice I would give people is, if you're an SAP customer, keep your data in SAP. So many people, Dan, a year ago, everyone's goal in life was to get their data in SAP, and they said SAP is too expensive. My purpose in life is to extract data out of SAP. My thought is SAP now is finally, and I've been at SAP a long time. SAP now, I believe in that whole snuggle, don't struggle. We understand the world has other solutions out there, other applications. So, but if most of your data, particularly finance data, is in SAP, keep your data there, but use tools to help integrate and make it all work together.
Very good. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Snuggle, don't struggle, Dan. That's I try to live that in my home life too. Doesn't always work, but I try.
I know. I've talked to you many times when you're out walking your fish. I know. So one other thing that I wanted to point out, and I missed it a while ago, but we get asked the question for someone that has not ever. We were on the phone last week with a active customer that one of your colleagues said, well, are you familiar with DataSphere? And there was 4 people on their end, and not a one had heard of what DataSphere is. And so they said, well, make a comparison for us. Compare the use of BW 7.5 to DataSphere and the difference in the technology and all that sort of thing. And I thought it was pretty cute what he said. He said BW is the equivalent of a 65 Nova, and DataSphere is the equivalent of a Tesla truck. So I'd say those are pretty significant gaps, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and that's why earlier I said, BW was birthed before my 22-year-old son at SMU.
That's right.
A lot's changed in that. But again, I go back to, if it works, don't always kill it. That 65 Nova is still running good, and all you have to do is go to the corner store and, get some milk on Sundays. Keep driving that Nova. No need to buy that $100,000 Tesla super truck. But you would look good driving it, if your friends don't laugh at you. But you know what I mean, Dan? It's if it works, why fix it? You be you. We're all about trying to give customers choice, because every customer is different. Every human's different.
Very good. Well, Jack, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. One of my favorite folks. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I certainly hope the folks that joined us today got the benefit that they should get from your great knowledge and experience that you've had. So
happy to do it.
Thank you
very much. Fun. Okay.
Folks, I would encourage you to, thank you, Jack. Folks, I would encourage you, if you have some questions, please reach out to us. We're happy to help you. We're connected with folks like Jack that we're always going to get the right answer for you and be able to support you. So thank you, everyone, and y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Jack.
Bye-bye.